lot to talk about today. And it was interesting to hear how many of you, of course, there usually are very, very small teams in the grant writing world in our nonprofits, but a lot of you guys are on really small teams. So it's a big challenge. And what are some of those tips that we can take to make our work more effective? So again, my name is Alice Runke, and then Aretha is behind the scenes, and she can answer any TechSoup questions that you may have. And then, like she mentioned, today and tomorrow are the only 2 days of our TechSoup promotion to get GrantStation at the discounted rate. And so it's 2 days only. And if you have questions about GrantStation, Jeremy is in the background as well to answer those questions. So, what we're going to do today is to start by helping us set those realistic expectations because with a small team, you shouldn't be expected to do things that a large team should do. But how do we set those benchmarks and things like that? Then I'm going to give you some tips on streamlining the process, just as things that you can do to make the process flow easier. And then how can you integrate, even if you are just a one-person team, how can you use the talents of others to help in your development work? And then how can we use other tools like the artificial intelligence tools and the chatbots that are out there to help in our grant seeking? These tools are really great for a grant writer, and there's a lot of ways to save you time by using those tools. And then finally, looking at different strategic partnerships and seeing if by the partnership you can get out there and get more dollars by partnering with other organizations. So we got a lot to do in the next 60 minutes. So I'm going to set the table here by just sharing with you probably about what you guys said in the chat, if we really looked at the numbers. And every year, GrantStation does a state of grant seeking report. If you get a chance and you hear about it, please fill it out for us. Because what it helps us do is to look at the overall kind of national picture of what's going on in grant seeking and we can help out each other. And so this won't be a surprise to you that 74% of the respondents in last year's was just had one or two people that were part of that team to help write the grants. And so that's pretty common, like I said. And that where are the challenges? And again, I don't think any of this is going to be a big surprise to you of just not having the time or staff, having a hard time researching or finding the grants. That's where GrantStation comes in to be that resource for you. Um, Working with funders, lots of competition, writing, reduced funding, all those other things, that are just challenges that we all experience. But having that number one challenge being that lack of time or staff. So that's why I think a webinar like this is really important so that we can learn what we can do to really maximize our efficiencies and things like that. So I want to share with you a tool that GrantStation has if you are a member of GrantStation or even if you aren't a member of GrantStation. We have what's called a benchmarker tool that comes from that survey, that the state of grant seeking survey. And so what the benchmarker tool allows you to do is to go in and by just simply answering two questions, answering where your budget range is, and then answering what your mission focus is, it's going to run you a basic report that's going to help you see what other organizations like yours, what they're doing with their grant seeking. Because you just can't have, you could just imagine that a hospital with a budget of, $10 million is going to have a really different grant seeking strategy than a small arts, organization that has a small budget that's $50,000. Like you can't compare those. It's just oranges and apples. So how do we get to apples? And this is the way we can kind of do that. So just by going in and clicking small budget and then clicking arts and culture, you get a report. And the report compares you with all of these different comparison things of how old the organizations are, what's the size of their staff, how much of their funding comes from grants, how many grants do they submit each that year, how many grants did they receive, what was the largest source of their grant, all the things. I'm not going to read you everything on this slide, but you can compare yourself against all these other things to find your apples to apples comparisons. So I'm just going to show you a couple of these comparison points and how they would look when you're looking at the actual report. So again, I chose the small budget and I chose arts and culture. So the question, what percentage of your organization's funding is from grants? That for small organization or for small budget organizations, 10% or less of their funding is from grants. That's the highest amount. And then you can see how it spreads out to a greater percentage for other organizations. Then just looking specifically at arts and culture, this would be with all sized budgets, right? That the highest percentage is 11 to 25% of the funding comes from grants. And so again, you can benchmark yourself and kind of see, well, I'm looking at, I get 2% of my funding from grants. Should I increase that? Or am I getting too over tied to grants, looking at this sort of thing. And then what this last column does is just, this would be everybody who filled out the survey, regardless of their budget or their mission focus. Here's just another question that can help you with that benchmarking. Approximately how many grant requests did your organization submit in 2023? So again, kind of looking at the largest percentages going across here, that in arts and cultures, about 25% submitted 3 to 5 with those small budgets, 35% submitted 3 to 5, and then overall, all organizations submitted 3 to 5. So again, it can just help you set up realistic expectations that aren't that you can manage, and this can also just be a good thing to work with your development team or your executive director or your board or whatever to see, where should we be in this grant seeking world? What are good, realistic targets that aren't going to overwhelm us? Or what are some of the targets that might help stretch us a little bit to a higher goal? So this, like I said, everyone can use this on our website under public resources. You can read the entire report if you like from the state of grant seeking. If you want to get that report for your organization, go to the benchmarker and plug in those two things, and you can get your own report to then have that discussion with others in your organization. So that's a really good way to kind of set the expectations that are manageable, right? So the next thing we're going to talk about is how we can kind of streamline the process. How can we make our writing a bit more efficient or effective and that sort of thing? So there's going to be 4 things that I'm going to talk about. First, on how you make decisions on which funding opportunities you want to pursue, right? So first, how are you doing that process of that prospecting to find the funders? Then looking at how you can develop a file of common attachments, how you can use a framework that you can use and reuse by planning once, and then you can write from there several applications to several different funders, and then places where you can kind of template up some of your work so that if you write it, let's say at the beginning of each year, then you can kind of come back and pull from that each year or throughout the year. So we're going to talk through each one of these, starting with that decision making for which funding opportunities you want to pursue. And so what this kind of creating this decision matrix, it just allows you to kind of, again, quickly see which ones are going to have the best return on your investment for your organization. It's an ideal tool if you have limited time and staff, right? Which everyone on this uh, webinar does. And then another thing that I found when I was a grant writer was there was oftentimes where people kind of come to you and that your board members kind of say, "Why aren't we applying for this grant? Oh, I found this grant." One of your volunteers comes by and says, "Oh, here's a grant. Why are you doing this grant?" And kind of makes you a little crazy. And so, what the decision matrix is going to allow you to do is to um, for you to say comfortably, listen, we're not going to apply for this one, or we are going to apply for this one. And it takes some of that stress off of you, off that decision making, because the matrix is what is going to define if it's a go or no go. So take some of that pressure off of you. So how do you create this matrix? So the basic components are first establishing the criteria that you're going to use in your matrix. So, what are those really important things about this funding opportunity that you want to kind of decide and measure where you are in these different areas? Then we're going to talk about assigning a weight to those areas to come up with this final score that again helps you put things in a go, no go sort of situation. So first, we're going to look at that criteria. So there's a lot of different criteria that you can use. You can establish your own unique criteria that really fits the bottleneck place parts of your organization or the parts that are, really critically, understaffed or underutilized in your organization. And I've just listed out, just 11 different options here, but you can have more than this. You don't have to have all of these. But just, again, does it fit with our mission? Obviously, you want a high score there. Is it a good fit given the funder's portfolio? So does the funder fund the kinds of things that you do? Is it important to have a relationship with the funder? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Do we meet all their criteria for applying? Obviously, you want a high number. Um, and so you can look through these different questions and really kind of decide, is time a primary consideration? Yes, probably for all the small organizations on this call, that is going to be a high consideration. So having the staffing in place and the time, let's say your busiest time of the year is the time this grant award is due. That might make a difference in if you decide to apply for this opportunity or not. Looking at just some of the things of, do we have, matching funds? Are matching funds required? Do we already have them kind of secured so we don't have to go and find matching funds? Those sorts of things. So all of these are just ideas, but you're going to establish the ones that are important to you, the ones that will really make a difference in your decision to apply to this funder or not. And once you have the different criteria, then what you want to do is assign a weight to each one. So you could just do it. I would start just with a 1 to 3, mix. You could go to 1 to 5, if you wanted to, but just I think 1 to 3, um, looking at that list and then applying that weight to each of those answers. So, again, you can start just from the top of the list and work down. You can also kind of work sideways by looking at those. Okay, our biggest problem is the staff time. So, we want to weigh that higher than the other things on the list. And then I know you all said that, you're a lot of small staff, but if you have other stakeholders in your organization, so for example, if you do have an accountant or a bookkeeper, it could also be important to have, you run it through as the program person or as the writer, and then maybe have the budget person also run through the criteria and give it a weight. Or you can weigh the, program related ones and they can weigh the financial related ones. Just because sometimes if you get those different perspectives, it can also just help you, again, decide what the actual best return on your investment will be because you guys are just coming from different perspectives. So, from a programmatic standpoint, it might look like, oh, this is great. But from that financial standpoint, it might look like, well, we don't have an audit, so we're not even eligible, those kinds of things. So, you provide that weight, and then the next thing is to then kind of develop your scoring. So you can create your own tool. Again, in this example, we use a scale of 1 to 5. Again, like I said, you could in the beginning just use 1 to 3. And then you decide, where your cutoffs are. So in just this example, if they scored 40% on these decisions, then they were going to apply for it. If they scored between 35 to 39, they were going to have more consideration on it, probably have to do a little more research, talk to leadership about, if we should invest our time in this or not. And then if it was 34 or below, then they would not apply for it. So kind of adopting your key then kind of helps you hit that red light, green light, orange light kind of situation. Again, takes some of that stress off of you and really makes you focus on those opportunities that, again, will have the highest return on investment for your organization. So you can do that, in an Excel spreadsheet. If you do have a GrantStation membership, we have a tool already built in for you. So, using that, the other thing I really suggest is that you also develop your tool, then go back and take an application that you applied to and got and run it through. And then go back and take an application that you applied for but didn't get and kind of see how the numbers kind of pan out for you. And that'll kind of help you decide, early on where you might need to tweak your particular tool that you're using, with maybe changing criteria, changing weights, and those sorts of things. If you kind of do those little tests, it'll really help you create the best tool for you to use going into the future. The second place that can be a real time saver is having a file of common attachments. And so, what these common attachments are actually attachments that you attach to your grant application. So usually a funder requires that budget that you need to submit, a budget narrative that you need to write about your budget, your project plan or your project narrative, whatever it's called, and you're writing all that. And then they say attach these documents to your application. So these are very common ones of your nonprofit incorporation letter, your list of board members, your audits, your tax forms, your organizational budget, job descriptions, things like that. And so what you can do, what I recommend that you do is just each year you come in, you update that year's board members, you add the most recent tax forms or audits if you have them, update those job descriptions and resumes and things like that. You'll update your organizational budget each year, but have kind of like a week out of the year, let's say, that you do this and you then take these documents and you either put them on several computers in your office or you keep them on a shared drive, just so that when the time comes, everyone has really easy access to these documents when it's time to submit the proposals. Because what generally happens is we get consumed with the part of writing the budget and writing the budget narrative and writing the entire project narrative. And we kind of forget, that, oh, yeah, we have to get these documents. And then, we're right at submission time and you can't find the 501c3 letter or your most recent tax form. And then, you can't get the grant submitted. So just have one time a year, you update these things, have it available for everyone. It will save you a lot of time and stress as you're working throughout the year to submit applications. This next tip comes from what we teach at GrantStation all the time, and this is what I call our project planning framework. And so we have a lot of webinars on how we do this and that sort of thing, but these are the common sections of a grant application. So the background and the need and the outcomes and how you're going to measure those outcomes, which are indicators, what you're going to do, how you're going to measure what you're going to do, and what your budget is. And so what we teach is that if you go in and spend that time to plan out and connect all the pieces in this framework, and if that's your first step in your application process, then what you can do is as you find three funders, let's say that you want to apply for one project, you can plan the project once, and then you can take the information out of this framework and use the terminology that the funder is asking for, use the format that the different funders are asking for, and take this information out and then put it in the order of a lot of different funders. And again, it actually, sometimes I think people are like, well, this wouldn't save me time. It's a lot of work to put this together. But once you put it together once, then, like I said, you can use that information and apply it to a lot of different funders very quickly. Um, and it really saves you time in the long term to do that planning first. It also just helps you write better applications because if you work through this process with us, you really see how, what people are challenged with in the community then ties to what you want to see changed and how you're going to measure that change. You're going to see the connection between the root causes of the need and what you're going to do to address that need, how your approach and what you're going to do is going to align with your budget because those two things should mirror one another. And so it's just a really helpful tool to write a coherent, consistent story. And then by doing, again, the planning once, you can then take the information and tailor it to different funders. So those are some of the streamlining ways to help that proposal writing process. The next is just kind of using the talents of those who support us, our stakeholders, and seeing if there's ways that they can help in this grant writing process. Again, I feel, as again, as a past grant writer, I feel that people put a tremendous amount of pressure on us and kind of think we have this magic ability to go into a room by ourselves and create this miraculous thing that's going to save the organization from, going out of business. And they put a lot of pressure on our shoulders. And I'm always here to say, don't, it's not all on you, right? And so you can kind of start where you're at, and kind of grow this network to kind of help you. But looking at things like having a fun activity of getting your board members together or your volunteers or your constituents that you serve, even, and see uh, if they have strengths in doing research, or they just really like to do editing, or perhaps they're really good at putting a budget together, or they're really good at making uh, numbers look great in a visual sort of way, where you can, start to include them in the process so that again, it's not all on you. So let's say that, that volunteer loves to do research, they can go find a lot of that need data that you want that's up to date, and it takes some of the pressure off of you. So kind of finding those skills. You also don't have to do it based on people's job descriptions, because a lot of times when I would come into an organization as a board member, people would always say, well, Alex will write the grants. And I did. But my thought was always, that's what Alice does for a living, right? Alice, that's not necessarily fun. There's other things like photography that I might think are more fun activities that I'd like to do. Could I share those skills with you? That kind of thing. So just have a thing where you're just pulling out what people like to do and then plugging them in wherever you can in the process of, maybe they like to get on GrantStation and look for funders or, that sort of thing. Um, so with this, I'm going to ask for a little bit of participation. If you could go to wherever you have the little kind of emojis on your thing, and I'm going to talk about some different types of people. And if this is you, like hit an emoji. Okay, there you go. Do that. So action people, they love to do the work, right? They start from the work, they learn from the work, they refine it, they do the next job. They're just kind of the Nike, just do it kind of people. And so we're seeing some of you guys pop up as that, right? Then there's also the people. And the people, they want to make sure that every voice is heard in the room. They like to address conflict and make sure that things are smoothing effectively. They want to make sure people's needs are met and kind of just working and making sure people are okay is the way that they kind of are oriented to the world. So great, we've got lots of people here too. Then we have meaning people, kind of visionaries. These are the people that they can really see that big picture. They can really motivate you to just engage you and make you feel great and make you see the difference that you're making in the world. And that meaning is what drives them. And they can share that vision with the people in the room. Okay. Now our last set is structure. Structure people need to um, see what's in place. They have checklists. They like to see the flow of work. They work on deadlines. They like all the dots, all the T's crossed and all the dots, I's dotted, right? So, okay, so we have all these people in the room, right? Which is great. And the reason that I did this is because when we are working on a team in the grant seeking world, we really need people who have all of these things. We might be a people person who's attracted to other people, but you need the action people to keep things moving along and the structure people to be keeping kind of track of what we're doing. If you put a group of meaning people or visionary people together, they are awesome. They make me feel so good. I love being around them. The work never gets done because the action people aren't there to get the work done and the structure people aren't there to put the pieces in place. And so just as you're out there trying to find, this could be a board issue of, recruiting for your board or, any part of your organization, but trying to get those different learning styles together for the best ultimate outcome, right? And I do think that sometimes we can be one or the other. As a consultant, I felt that if I walked into a room and nobody in the room was a people person, I was going to start to, I would see the need to take the pulse of what was going on and I would start to merge to become a people person. And so again, I think people do, move across these things depending on the situation. Okay. And so, yeah. So why is that all important? Because we need people in all of those quadrants to really create an effective team. I want to share another really great program with you, and that's the AmeriCorps Vista program. So there's different AmeriCorps programs. There's AmeriCorps just plain without the word Vista behind it. Then there's AmeriCorps Vista. Then there's even other ones as well. But AmeriCorps Vista stands for Volunteers in Service to America. It's an anti-poverty program, and members sign up to be Vista members, and then they serve a one-year term with a nonprofit organization. They can serve additional terms, but you sign up for a year term. And what a Vista members do is they provide capacity building work to the nonprofit. So a Vista member would be able to help you, help you write grants, help you develop a fundraising plan, help you do a marketing plan, help anything that's kind of like behind the scenes and help your organization develop its structures. Okay. Now, just to make the difference, then AmeriCorps without the Vista, they are people who are actually providing the direct services that your organization provides. So if you have a food pantry, the AmeriCorps members would be out there handing out the food, doing this and that. An AmeriCorps Vista member would be writing the grants, doing the advertising, developing partnerships to make it work, doing the behind the scenes work. That's the distinction. So these are great. When I've worked or not worked, but when I've been on boards that it's all volunteers, then, we've applied for a Vista member who really helped us, build our internal capacity to raise funds and those sorts of things. And so I really encourage you to take a look at AmeriCorps Vista as an opportunity to help with your efforts. Okay, so we got a couple more left. One is looking at artificial intelligence tools. And we at Grantstation have done a lot of work since this all kind of came about. And my first personal thought when I heard about AI and all these kinds of things, number one, I thought, well, this is just for the kids. This isn't something that I need to worry about. This isn't something that is going to help me or grant seekers. But then I started to talk to someone maybe a little younger than me who was able to show me what the tools could do. And so we just started playing with the tools and starting to figure out where do these chatbots like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude AI or those other ones, where can they really help in the grant writing process? And so we teach organizations how to do this as well. But creating those first drafts, they're great tools for taking your source material. So taking, let's say, that project planning framework, putting that into the chatbot, and then asking it to take that information that you've already written and then reformat it into the way this funder wants to see it. So using their set of instructions to create that first draft. And then you never just throw information in a chat bot, pull it out and you're done. You want to come back, edit that material. It's a real iterative process, but it's really helpful just to take things that you've already done, reformat it, then you can come back and put your special tweaks on it to make it yours. It's really good at editing. These were developed using what's called large language models. So they're great at using proper English, um, doing grammar edits, doing punctuation edits, um, changing your style. Let's say you have a formal proposal that you've written and it was written in a formal way, using a chatbot to take what you've already written and then say, can you make this more, write this in a more conversational voice for a donor? And then, then that they can change the way that the thing is formatted. So it's more chatty that you might use to write a letter to a potential donor, as opposed to a more formal way that you wrote to a funder. It's great at just brainstorming ideas. I go in all the time, with an idea and kind of see what does it come up with. I have to do, I have to write, this kind of blog. These are my main points that I really want to get through. How should I structure this blog? And it will come back with ideas. Again, some of them are fabulous, and I'm like, oh, that's great. And I work to add those in, and some I go, nope, that's not what I want to do. And so I ignore them. Right. But just brainstorming, it just allows you to have another, I don't want to say person in the room, but it really can provide you with a perspective that if you're all by yourself, you have a hard time, with that back and forth because you don't have anybody. Doing things like writing job descriptions or any other tedious type of work that you have to do, it's really good at that sort of thing. I already talked about repurposing your source material into grant applications. Um, and then all of us know how hard it is to reduce narratives when we have something written and then a funder says, put this in 1,000 characters or, 250 words or whatever it is, and how incredibly challenging that is. And so these chatbots do a really good job of reducing those or even adding to. You could say expand on these ideas if it was the other way around, but usually we have more of a challenge reducing the narratives. It's not going to be perfect when you say 1,000 characters. It's not going to get you right to 1,000. It might be 100 under or 100 over, but it will get you closer. And it's really good at picking out the important things so that the things that you are including are the key points. And then, summarizing things, if you write a narrative and then you have to have an executive summary, something like that, it's really good at taking your material and then, summarizing it for you for that shorter description that you might need to have. So there's lots of great ways to really save us some time. And I feel that we have to use these things ethically. We have to use them in a way, especially when we're using our own materials. That's an ethical way to use these things. Brainstorming ideas. Again, you're just getting ideas that you're going to have to then develop in your communities and in your organizations and those sorts of things. So you don't just input something and then take the information and use it. It's a part of your process. But I think it really is kind of a game changer for the small organization because this is where we do spend a lot of our time, reworking things we've already done and this and that. And this is kind of the first thing that's helping to level that playing field for the small organization. So I really encourage you to look at different ways. Again, we teach at Grant Station different workshops on this, how to do it from, just getting started to really advanced ways to use the chatbots. So the next part is to look at some strategic partnerships. A lot of times, I think this, yeah. Sometimes, when we are, working in a small organization, sometimes it's a great idea to look outside of your organization and see if there are applications that you can be a part of that you're not the main applicant. So it could be, an association that gets together or a coalition of people in your community or a collaborative of groups of people, groups of organizations getting together to submit an application jointly. Um, and it could be, the application is submitted jointly. It could be that you're just a partner in the application, but you get a piece of the money and you get to do your part in the application. But looking at that can also save you a lot of time, to be more of that supportive angle for another organization that's going to be the applicant, but you don't have to spend that time writing and developing the budgets and administering the grant. You'll just come in and do the piece that's your specialty. And then you don't have all the extra added stress and costs of writing the applications. When I was a grant writer, I also did a number of different joint programs where two organizations would come together. They would split the cost. I was a consultant. They would split the cost of me, and they would apply to this funder together. And one organization would do their part, and the other organization would do the part that they were responsible for. But they then shared the cost of the grant writer, and that was pretty effective. Then there might be different shared support functions around your grant seeking, around just your organization in general that could save you some money and energies of possibly, let's say you do need, let's say an administrative assistant or something like that, that you could share that role of that person with another organization to save you money and still, you know, you still have that support. Or for, again, a grant writer, somebody who could do that work for multiple organizations and everyone pays a piece of it. Just sharing different things like locations and things like that could also be really advantageous, especially for people who are working remotely and things like that. And then the biggest, part of the spectrum, which I wouldn't probably It's a long time and it's a lot of development, but the biggest side of that is to then merge with another organization and do your work collaboratively. But that takes a lot of time and energy. But just again, kind of looking at where you might fit and how that partnership can really help you um, be able to apply to more funders and seek out, um, new programs and different components like that. I also want to share before we start on some questions, just something that I know that it happens a lot that one of the requirements to submit an application is an audit. And that's a barrier for a lot of small organizations. And so, just a couple of things with that. If you do find that that's a requirement, the first thing that I would do is call the funder and talk to them. Let them know that you don't have an audit, that you're not big enough for an audit, you don't have the funds for an audit, those kinds of things, why you don't have the audit, which will make sense to them because an audit can cost as much as some people's entire operating budgets, right? Um, and ask them if there's a workaround to the audit. Now, some funders will say, okay, yes, I understand. Please submit me, your balance sheet and your profit and loss statements and your tax forms and this and that, and in lieu of that audit. Okay, so you have a workaround. Other funders get more strict about it and they say, no, if you don't have an audit, you can't apply. So if you're in that boat, again, partnering with a partner would work if they had an audit. Or if you didn't have somebody that you could find to do that, looking to a fiscal sponsor could be an option for you. And there's different kinds of fiscal sponsorship. There's different networks of people, but if you some of these links, you'll see kind of what the types are, how they work. Um, and then if you're looking for, a sponsor, then there's organizations that just they do that. They do that for other organizations. And so you can find those that are set up to do that and work with them. So just that's just such a common barrier for small organizations that I didn't want to leave that without talking about it a little bit. I had a one client who did that. She wanted to apply for a state the the community development block grant money, and it was through her state, and she didn't have an audit, and so she got a fiscal sponsor and then she still got to do the work that she, wanted to do and that sort of thing, got the experience, all that sort of thing. And as her budget grows, or grew, then, she would then be able to be in a place to get an audit, right? So she was trying to grow to that level. So I didn't want to leave that without talking about that. So we are at right exactly at a quarter till. So what we can do is Jeremy's in the background and he's been collecting some of your questions. If you have any questions that you haven't put in, please put those in try not to put them in the chat because they can get hidden in there. Put them in the Q&A box and we can get through some questions.
That sounds great. And just a quick reminder, everything that Alice has been talking about today is completely gone into in greater detail in our build section on GrantStation. So if you become a member of GrantStation, everything you've seen today will then be covered again with more examples and more things to read, more access, and a lot of questions that we've had actually deal with a lot of the features that we offer as a GrantStation member that you have access to. But with that said, let's get into these actual questions. So, Alice, here's a new one. We are a
Yep.
small nonprofit. Never have heard that before, ever. In my 20 years, never heard about a small nonprofit. We're discussing putting together a small committee of volunteers working on grants because we don't have the money to hire a staff person to focus on grants. Do you have a structure you'd recommend for a committee?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, and a great idea as well. That having that group of volunteers to help you. Again, if we go back to one of those earlier slides where I had that list of a lot of different things that you would need in the grant seeking process. So again, from people to research your grant opportunities, using GrantStation or something like that, from doing research into the need to helping, write your budgets, to doing editing, to doing some of the writing. All of those sorts of things. And so I would think that if as you get your committee together, you want to help, like help define for them what their actual role is going to be. Again, if they're like working more on the front end, if they were a researcher versus the back end, if they're an editor, and then uh, don't overwork them, right? I mean, keep them at a nice pace, connected to you, but don't overwork them and make them run from you. Keep that kind of pipeline, at a workable level for everybody. And then just having a really good structure of your timeline for when things will be due. So with each grant application, putting together a list of everything that has to be done, who is going to do that, and when it's due. So that at the beginning of the project, everybody kind of knows the time commitment and the time frame in which they have to do their part, and then that will make the whole process go easier for everybody because, if you're writing the application, you need to have the information on, the organization and the background and the data, right? So that has to come first, those sorts of things. So kind of putting it together like that, structured with people knowing their jobs, knowing what's expected, and be very nice to them. Support them at every opportunity. And there's lots of organizations that do that very well and are very successful.
A quick one I want to fit in here, which is sort of related, is what does a physical sponsor do?
Okay, so a fiscal sponsor is the organization that would actually be the applicant for the grant funds. And they are the ones that are audited. So it's their books that are that the funder is looking at their audits and that sort of thing. And then there's different kinds of models. And on uh, let me see if I can go back. Um, it's not letting me go back. On the slide before this, there was a comprehensive guide, and there's different kinds of models as to how you can set them up. And so, sometimes they become a program of that fiscal sponsor. Um, Sometimes it's more like you're applying to the fiscal sponsor for dollars. There's just different models. And you also, you could be a program. Like, let's say you run a program and you don't have a 501(c)(3). Well, you could go to a fiscal sponsor to for them to be the applicant, and you could be a program under them, or you can also be a nonprofit, and the other nonprofit is the fiscal sponsor. So there's lots of different ways to kind of set those up. And they're not fast. Don't think that like, oh, I'm just gonna get this done this week. Like there's a lot that you want to talk about and consider as you're doing working with them and building that relationship. So I would start doing that, early in the process.
Sandra asks, beyond the overall process, as you've been talking about, where do you suggest that they start when they're required to do a program and the fundraising work concurrently? I mean, it's all great, but it takes time. And as you mentioned, at other stakeholders, how do you create this time?
Yeah, I mean, it is challenging. I hope that there's some things in here that you did see as time-saving techniques. Again, of using some of the AI tools, of getting templates together that you can use and reuse through that planning process. There's no magic bullet that I have of I can't create time. And trust me, I wish I had more time as well. We all do. But again, working with your board, your volunteers, looking at uh, if you have colleges or universities around, sometimes those English departments or business departments are teaching students how to do some of this work that possibly you could get an intern, looking at a Vista program. So kind of taking what was talked about in this webinar and trying to figure out which ones would help you the most would be what I would recommend.
I want to turn to AI questions. We have a couple others we'll get to, but I think AI is a good thing to talk about right now. Renee asks, how do funders feel about AI being used in funding proposals? That's the largest concern about using them. They're worried about RFPs could be rejected if they're flagged as AI generated.
Yeah. So again, I have not heard a lot from funders in any systematic way about, you know, having applications being AI, generated and that sort of thing. Again, um, when you're using your own source material and asking, the chatbot to take what you've already written and then, put it in a different format, again, then you're taking that formatted work and you're going to take it out and put your own, again, spins on it, your touches, your whatever. It's your work. I mean, it's not, you're not stealing anything. You're having your work put in a different format, and I don't think that that's unethical. It's what large universities and nonprofits have done because they have 20 staff members, right? So it's using that as a tool, and as long as you're not just going in and putting in a funder's RFP and then saying, write me a STEM program, and then that STEM program has nothing to do with you or your organization, you wouldn't get funded anyway. It would probably be a terrible application, right? But when you're using your own source material, when you're editing, um, I think it's an assist.
Like another employee, basically, like a copy
Yeah,
editor
yeah.
or something like
I
that.
hate to say like connect them to people, but it is like having an editor um, on your staff. Yeah.
Alicia asks, as AI tools are becoming more integrated into grant writing, we have a couple partners that actually do that specifically, along with AI bias and donor trust. How can a nonprofit professional use AI responsibility or responsibly, actually, and still maintain sort of that human approach as opposed to
Yeah.
the AI approach?
Yeah. So one of the things, there are different settings that you can put into to like your chatbot. So there's different privacy settings in ChatGPT or Gemini or any of them. Okay. Where you can turn off the sharing of your information. Okay. And you can increase your privacy that way. So it's not going to use your information to train the model. That being said, I would never put any information in that was about, that was directly about a client and their name or a funder or a donor and those sorts of things. I still, even with that being, that safeguard being on, that I would wait. I would then take the information out that I have, used for my first draft. I would then go in and add that story about that typical client or whatever you're doing with that, pull the quotes that person, gave to you, and keeping those confidential and things like that. So that can kind of come, that humanizing can come in that, you put your source material in, you ask it to reformat it, you pull it out, and then you come in to make it your own, to make it human. And that's, I think, a very ethical way to use the material or to use the chatbots. Um, the bias, so just realizing that the chatbots were built using what they call large language models. So they took massive amounts of data and, put it all together, right? And so when we're using a AI, if there's bias in the information that was used to train it, that bias is going to be split back out to us. So that's again part of our job is to see that bias and notice it when we see it, and why we have to edit. That's why we have to make sure that we're being vigilant about bias and that we can't just rely on a chatbot just to write us our grade proposals, right? We have to be in that process. So those are the ways that I would, do that work.
Related to that, Terry asks, when you delete an AI chat, is it permanently deleted or is it still out there?
Terry, I might have to ask uh, David, who's our director of online education. You can email me and I can shoot that to him. I know that when I'm on ChatGPT and I delete just a chat that I did, it is permanent. It's deleted off of my information. And because we have a Teams account, my information is not supposed that we're supposed to be at the high level of privacy as well. Like we're not supposed to be training the model because of we have a Teams account. Um, where it actually goes, I don't honestly know. That would be a little bit more of a David question. So just email that to me and I'll have David reach out to you.
I think our last question we can fit in is from Sherry Lynn. Um, Sort of going off of what you were saying earlier about being able to put things together, she thinks you need to have the funds to start doing this, and then you get reimbursed working on it later. Is that how it works? And basically, I think the bottom line is, what if we don't have the capacity, but desperately need help? How do we do that?
And so Sherilyn, I think if I'm wrong, just email me, but I think you might be talking about the Vista program.
That's exactly it.
Um,
She just mentioned in the chat. Yeah.
okay, okay. So let's see. Have the funds to start it and then reimbursed. So I know you would have to work with the feds and that sort of thing to set up how it does work. Um, I'm not 100% sure on if it's a reimbursement or the other way around. And so that one I'd have to do just a little bit of research on just because I haven't the last time I did it, we as an organization had to pay for our member to work with us, but it's not a lot of money. Um, and so um, you do have to pay for part of their year of service, but it was low, like under $5,000. So if you can have a full-time member for under $5,000, that's, a really good deal. So, but you could go to a funder and ask for the money for a Vista member, which would be a really good investment for them, to be able to build your capacity. But yeah, you would have to have the money to pay for your Vista member.
Yeah, there's a few people mentioning about how big their budget is. Sherry Lynn says hers is 25. Nikki says hers is under 5,000. So a lot of organizations with very low low budgets. So this is
Yeah.
where something like GrantStation is kind of a really good fit because you'll save quite a bit of money on a membership. Again, 2 days only. That's the 11th and 12th. Is that today or is that tomorrow?
Today and tomorrow. The promo ends
Today and
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
So
That's
yeah.
right. So 119, normally 699, saving a lot of money on this membership. Everything we talked about today, you'll have access to in the various sections of GrantStation, including all of our grant databases. But we also have something that hasn't been mentioned. And if you were wondering about how to actually go about applying for a grant, maybe you're not sure what's working, we have downloadable examples of winning grant applications. You can actually download them as a part of your membership and see what's currently working. What words are people using? Oh, this is a good approach. Maybe I should use that. All this is available to you as a member of GrantStation. So highly encourage you to check out grantstation.com, but more importantly, head to TechSoup.org and take advantage of this great deal. And right now in the chat, they just put that information in there for you. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you have any further questions about GrantStation, guess what? You can email us, info@grantstation.com. Email anyone here at GrantStation. We'll be happy to help you out. But the best email to use is info@grantstation.com. I see one party emoji. Thank you for that. Alice, any final thoughts to leave with people?
No, thanks everybody for being here and sticking in with us, and look forward to seeing you on another webinar.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks.